COVID-19 could wipe out as much as 1.7% of the Chinese mainland's GDP in the worst-case scenario, according to a report released by the Asian Development Bank last Friday. The report suggests an impact of 0.1 to 0.4% on global GDP, while two-thirds of the impact will fall on the Chinese mainland. So what are the bases of such predictions, and what can economies do to defy such predictions? I'm pleased to be joined via Skype from Manila, the Philippines, by Dr. Yasuyuki Sawada, Chief Economist of the Asian Development Bank. Dr. Sawada, thank you very much for joining us today. So as I said, as much as 1.7% could be wiped out of the Chinese GDP, of course, in the worst-case scenario, and the impact on the global GDP could be 0.1 to 0.4%. How were the conclusions worked out? What were the methods used to calculate the impact first?
So basically, we set several possible channels. There are many multiple channels how COVID-19 can affect the Asian economy, Chinese economy, as well as the global economy. Basically, we set the three main channels. Number one is demand and consumption decline in China. That's the first order direct impact. Secondly, tourism and business travel negatively affected. Outbound travel from China, also inbound travelers from outside of Asia to Asia. That has been affected. That's the number two, second channel. And thirdly, now China and other Asian economies are tightly connected through trade transactions as well as supply chain networks. So Chinese economy and production are slowing down, naturally generates a negative spillover effect to other Asian economy. So three channels we quantify, and also situation is still changing. So instead of pinning down plausible scenario, we set three scenario. Moderate, best case scenario where only 2 months it's going to take.
Let me jump in here.
Yes.
Let me jump in here because I'm going to introduce the different scenarios that you are talking about, because I think it is very interesting.
That's right.
So basically, there are four scenarios that are being listed in this report. The best case scenario, which is the People's Republic of China outbreak is contained relatively quickly with travel bans and precautionary behavior abating after 2 months. And then in the moderate scenario is when such behavior abating after 3 months. And then in the worst case scenario, such policy remaining in place for 6 months. And then there is also a hypothetical worst case scenario for other economies. So the most important are the three, are the 2 months, 3 months, and 6 months. So where are we now? Where are we now? And how does that scenario translate in actual GDP numbers, let's say?
So its situation is still fluid. So which scenario has what probability or likelihood? It's a little difficult to say. Even on a best case scenario, we set starting time, initiation time late January. So if Chinese government or Chinese economy can contain COVID-19 epidemic within until the end of March, then best case scenario 2 months, and then moderate case scenario 3 months, and then worst and worst hypothetical worst scenario, it will take 6 months. So at this point, it's a little bit difficult to say how long it will take. Although we see in China this epidemic has been already under control, and we see a taper off a number of cases, and also economy is gradually bounced back. So I think at this moment, it's still difficult to say which scenario is more plausible than others. But having said this, outside of China, in Asia, Korea, Japan, as well as the European countries, Italy, Germany, and France, and also Spain, we see increasing number of COVID-19 cases. So that's maybe some kind of a partially hypothetical worst case scenario is also materializing. So I think I would say at this stage, what is happening is really a hybrid of these 3+1 scenarios.
Okay, but for China's GDP projection for this year, is there a range of numbers that you're looking at? Because you talked about as much as 1.7% if it is the worst case scenario, right? So
that's right.
what would be a middle number, let's say, because people always want, we want to hear numbers because
That's right.
we can remember, we can understand it better. If you could provide such a
so,
number.
yeah. Actually, last year, December last year, 2019, we made an economic forecast. So, and 5.8% growth rate for China in year 2020. That was our latest pre-COP19 forecast. So taking this 5.8% as a basis, what's the likely impact of COP19? Again, it depends on the scenario. Best case, quickly contain this epidemic. Then slowing down, and the impact will be as high as 0.3 percentage point GDP. And if worst case scenario materializes, if it takes 6 months to contain, then 1.7 percentage growth, GDP growth slow down. So again, it's a little difficult to pin down, which is more realistic at this stage. But I think there are a few scenarios possible. So I think one positive trajectory, we see China can maintain more than 5% growth rate or 5.5% growth rate. If it takes time, like 6 months, then Chinese growth may be slowing down further.
The scenarios suggest also, as I said, a global impact ranging from 0.1 to 0.4% of global GDP. What do these numbers mean? How significant are these? And what would be the consequences that could follow for businesses, for transnational trade, and so on?
So this growth slowdown, a major proportion is burdened by Chinese economy and Asian economy. So Asian economy, according to our study and the result, China is worst hit by this COP19, and then followed by other surrounding Asian economy also slowing down. Again, depending on the duration of this epidemic containing. But outside of Asia, impact on the non-Asian world economy, rest of Asia, is much smaller. If we setting aside this looming number of cases and epidemic in European countries. So I think overall impact will be really disproportionately affecting Asian economy, and most notably in China.
Right now we're seeing more cases being reported in Europe. We're also seeing very dramatic fluctuation of stock markets in the United States, and the infection numbers not looking very rosy at this moment. What is the longer term forecast for economic impact in these part of the world? Why do you think the report has concluded or predicted that the majority of the burden will be on China?
Because China already we have seen consumption decline and also production shrinkage. And again, China is one of the core region and the country of Asia and global supply chain network and trade. So that's why Chinese economy slowed down. First order impact is shouldered by China. That spill over to surrounding Asian economy. So that's a basic structure of spillover. But having said this, because COP19 is really unforeseen contingencies, so like a SARS epidemic in year 2003 and also a MERS epidemic in 2015, it's natural to see arrival of new disease and increasing number of cases in new country. That kind of new arrival of new information can affect equity market prices and other markets transactions. So naturally, I think it's natural to observe volatility. But overall, if we take experience of SARS and the MERS epidemic and other epidemic cases around the globe, I don't think this disease will really affect the fundamentals of and generating a permanent impact on global economy. So
how do you look at the possibility? Yeah, because there are people who are predicting something like 60 to 65% chance of a recession, for instance, in the United States. We saw the circuit breaker of the stock market triggered also by the oil price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. How likely would you say is the possibility of a recession?
So again, it's a little difficult to predict and give you one number probability of recession at this stage. Again, depending on the different scenario, which scenario gonna materialize. But what I can say is global economy is driven by not only these unforeseen epidemics, but also, for example, global trade cycle and also global manufacturing, electronics production cycle, and semiconductor cycles. Actually, we have seen some global economy is tilted downward since last year, and still, for example, we are waiting rolling out of 5G technology. So if 5G technology is really successfully arrived to the global economy, I think there is little chance of recession of global economy. So again, whether this epidemic can trigger global recession, I don't think this is really fundamentally changing incident.
All right, we have to leave it there. I hope the situation will not be so prolonged and that the economies of China and other countries will not be so heavily impacted. Many thanks to Dr. Yasuyuki Sawada joining us from the Asian Development Bank.
Thank you very much, Roshan. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.